Lulu is an opera written in the 1930s by the composer Alban Berg. It's about an extraordinary woman who is, in my opinion, the architect of her own destiny, even, in my opinion, of her own death. For those of you familiar with the opera or Wedekin's play upon which it is based, you may have the image of a femme fatale. You may have the assumption of a misogynist story that presents us with a woman used, abused, portrayed as a manipulator, a man-eater, a sex fiend, finally degraded and savagely murdered. I disagree. She is one of the most honest people I have ever met, on or off stage. I love her because she is true to herself. She forces others to see her for who she is. She survives. She is angry, risky, triumphant. She fails and loves wholeheartedly. She lives every moment with a complete and committed presence. She is everything I could hope to be. The trajectory was this. I was hired 3 or 4 years in advance, as is normal in opera world, to sing Lulu at La Monnaie, the opera company in Brussels, with the opening night last October 2012. It is a marathon of a role, 3.5 hours of music. And Lulu is on stage almost the entire time, singing her life. The idea of taking on this role was absolutely daunting. It seemed impossible to me. It is one of the most demanding roles in the entire operatic repertoire. Let me say up front, I have a problem with my own aging, not with anyone else's. Turning 40 was very difficult. I have probably another 10 to 15 years left because as a singer, I have a best before date. I have a shelf life. I will eventually lose my bloom, my elasticity, my virtuosity. It makes me angry. I feel driven and I feel desperate. But my dedication to art, and it has been a full-on, intense, and passionate relationship, the best and longest relationship of my life, pays off in a way that I never could imagine. There is no way that 5 or even 2 years ago I could have tackled such a role. So for that I am thankful. To sing a role like Lulu is not just a matter of voice and musical preparation, it's a matter of life experience and time. First step, sign the contract, say yes. Fear and apprehension. Next, purchase the score. It's actually 2 scores, this thick. One for Acts 1 and 2 and another for Act 3. They are heavy. I had to buy a knapsack because I couldn't carry them in my purse. And I got a very good massage therapist. After a year of avoiding it, I opened the scores. I started carrying them around with me everywhere I went. But I could barely bring myself to open them. They would sit on the desk at whatever hotel I was in whatever country, and I would just look at them. They loomed. It's funny because I often have reviews that call me fearless or extraterrestrial, and that always shocks me. I am terribly human, and I am filled with fear, but I am rarely debilitated by it. I continue to move forward somehow, despite my trepidation. Of course, like anyone, I hear these little voices over here, then they say sometimes that I'm not good enough, or that I'm not strong enough, or that I won't make it, or that I don't have the stamina. And I hear them, and they scare me, but I don't engage in a dialogue with them. I just keep breathing and singing. The process of learning an opera role can be different for every piece. In the case of Lulu, I began very meticulously just with note and rhythm. I didn't think much about the text. I didn't think much about interpretation. I just wanted to learn the lay of the land. I won't get analytical about the music, but let me say that it comes from the end of the Romantic era and at the beginning of the new world of harmony. 1930s. If I had to give colors and temperatures, I would say icy, hot, red, black, platinum, and never, never, never gray. What does it feel like to sing Lulu? It feels like my whole body is shaking with resonance. It feels like I become the sound of humanity. It is exhilarating and it's extremely satisfying in a physical way. In late spring of last year, I closed my Lulu scores and I committed myself to another opera for a few months, written on skin, which premiered last summer in Aix-en-Provence and which opened 2 nights ago at the Royal Opera House here in London. The brilliant Katie Mitchell directed this incredible opera by George Benjamin and Martin Crimp. I sing the central role of Agnès. It was written for me. All our roles were written for those of us singing at the Opera House. It's about a 13th century woman who liberates herself from an oppressive marriage by way of an illicit love affair. I spend most of my life singing text and music written by men. I am a muse to many composers, most of them male. They work out their demons on me, or so we hope. Alban Berg certainly did so with Lulu. I feel like when I am singing those female characters, I am not just that character, I am also the composer. I am their voice. It's very interesting for me that I chose a career, one of the few careers, in which I have absolutely no male competition. I'm a soprano. And now, by the way, I am expanding into the field of conducting, which is almost completely dominated by men. It's a strange combination. Fortunately, in making music, as far as I'm concerned, I can be both male and female. There's no gender to sound. When Written on Skin finished in July, I removed myself to Nova Scotia, my home province in eastern Canada, to a cottage on the ocean with seals on the bank, a chorus of seals. I don't know if you've ever heard them sing, but it's extraordinary. And for my summer vacation, I worked about 8 hours a day trying to memorize the opera, because in opera, you have to show up at the first rehearsal with the piece completely memorized. So I traipsed around the lawn or on the beach below, walking and jumping and singing and dancing Lulu, until she became incorporated in me. And then I returned to Europe to begin rehearsals. The monumental task of memorizing the role gave me strength. I still was fearful. I still wasn't sure I would make it. But it did give me a little bit of extra power and something that I could bring to Lulu. I arrived for the first day in Brussels for rehearsal, and I was taken to a ballet shop to be fitted for my pointe shoes, as if it wasn't already going to be hard enough to sing the piece. I was told that I would play it on pointe, at least the first 1.5 hours. Because the director had the idea that Lulu, who is a dancer in the opera, was a ballet dancer and had dreams of being a ballet dancer. So I'm 41 and I was going on pointe for the first time. It hurt like hell and I loved it. I couldn't wait to lace up every morning. And after performances, sometimes we even had a doctor in my dressing room to administer the next prescription for my infected feet. It was fantastic. I could hardly walk. Before I was going on stage for the opening night, I had a blank piece of paper taped onto the mirror of my dressing room. I would stare at it to clear my mind. I didn't want any preconceptions. Every night I wanted it to be clean. And as I walked down the stairs, hobbled, wearing my pointe shoes, to begin the first act, I felt very deeply, yes. All the opera roles I sing have a very heavy effect on my life. And in the past year, I have sung 3 characters, all of whom commit suicide rather than stay oppressed. In our production of Lulu, at the end of the piece, she forced into prostitution. It's her first day, and she knows she won't be able to bear it. And the third customer she picks up is Jack the Ripper. And in our staging, it was a conscious choice. And at the end, instead of him murdering her, she takes his hand, and smiling, she drives his knife into her body. In my own meager attempts at self-analysis, I would say that I experienced 2 psychological syndromes in the process of preparing and performing Lulu: Stockholm Syndrome and survivor guilt. As you know, Stockholm Syndrome is when a captive begins to identify in a positive way with her captor. In my case, I felt like Lulu took me hostage from the moment I signed the contract in 2008. She invaded me, and she took over my mind and my heart and my soul, and I eventually fell in love with her. She laid beside me in bed at night. She woke me up. She was in my dreams, and she became the spring in my step. She became my reason for moving, for looking after myself, and I ended up wanting to defend her to the ends of the earth. Survival guilt was the more painful of the two. Lulu died, and I lived. I had to go on after closing night, and it took me months after the final performance to recover. She was gone, and I had to sing other music. I tried to make her part of everything I sang. I felt like I was being unfaithful. Nothing compared to her. Nothing even came close. And I would burst into tears whenever anyone would mention her name. I felt both invincible and useless. Eventually, those feelings faded, but I miss them and I miss her. I want to read you, finally, the text of Lulu's lead, her main pivotal aria in the piece. She sings it at the moment that her third husband, Dr. Schön, the man she professes as the only man she has ever truly loved, the man who began an affair with her when he was in his 30s and she was barely a teenager, hands her a gun and demands that she kill herself. She doesn't. She sings this aria, and then when he tries to force her to her knees and pray before her imminent death, she shoots him 5 times. I will read it first in English, and then I will read it in German, because even if you don't speak German, you will feel the strength and architecture of the language. She says, "If men have killed themselves for my sake, that does not lower my value. You know just as well as me why you made me your wife, as I know why I took you for my husband. You deceived your best friend for me, and yet you cannot go on deceiving yourself. If you hold me as a sacrifice for your last days, remember that you are the one who took away my entire youth. I have never in the world wished to seem to be anything other than what I am taken for, and I have never in the world been taken for anything other than what I am. Wenn sich die Menschen meinetwillen umgebracht haben, so setzt das meinen Wert nicht herab. Du hast so gut gewusst, weswegen du mich zur Frau nahmst, wie ich gewusst habe, weswegen ich dich zum Mann nahm. Du hattest deine besten Freunde mit mir betrogen. Du konntest nicht gut auch noch dich selber mit mir betrügen. Wenn du mir deinen Lebensabend zum Opfer bringst, so hast du meine ganze Jugend dafür gehabt. Ich habe nie in der Welt für etwas anderes scheinen wollen, als wofür man mich genommen hat. Und man hat mich nie in der Welt für etwas anderes genommen, als was ich bin." Thank you.